Our last speaker of this session is Matthew Shawkey from Ghent University, and he'll be talking about melanin nanostructures seen in birds and material systems inspired by that.
Thank you very much. Thanks to the organizers for the invitation, and for putting together the great meeting and this wonderful session. I'll start off. I'll kind of snake back. I'll start off with the acknowledgments and then work into the science of it. While also telling a bit of how I got involved in biomimicry. This is my lab group, and the work today that's well, not all of it, but the work today that I'll talk about is a lot of it was done by Michael here, Brahm, Wanji, and Sabata's not here. So these are the most important acknowledgments here. And of course, I also have to acknowledge funding sources. And so I come at this, so actually let me start with the topic, melanin. So we've heard about melanin in the great session that happened earlier today. And I won't go too much into all these background details about melanin. What I want to briefly say that wasn't talked about too much was this. So we talked about the absorption properties. Melanin also has this very interesting property where it has a high refractive index, so it bends light very strongly as it goes through, and that actually makes it a very interesting optical material. And as I'll show you today, some other properties, as other people have mentioned, it also has very nice thermal properties. So it really has properties that span across wavelengths. From 300 to 2000 and even above. And it's these thermal effects that I'll focus on today. But of course, I also want to talk about colors, because that's what really got me into this topic, was seeing, being a biologist and being a birder and being obsessed with, becoming obsessed with the colors of these birds, wanting to know more and more about them. And in some sense, at some point needing funding to continue doing that. I got into the not only the physics of it and the chemistry, but also, started to see that there were actual potential practical applications. At first I thought, okay, this is a way to sell it. And then as I started doing it, I realized that it's actually a very, very cool approach. I actually got less cynical as I got older. So that's good. So the first, I'm going to tell you two stories about the thermal effects of melanin. This first one has to do, of course, with birds, and it started with an observation. Being birders, and many of us in our labs, in the lab, we wanted to, we made this observation that many birds that fly very long distances have tended to have dark wings. So in particular, seabirds, things like albatross, that would spend, weeks, months at sea, fly incredibly long distances. Birds that flew had incredibly long migrations, tended to have these dark wings. Whether they would have, their colors on their body would vary quite a bit, but typically their wings would be dark, either entirely or just the tips of the wings. And then we read this really interesting theoretical paper that suggested that that there was an advantage to having these darker wings. The idea was that the feathers would heat up more, or in this case they were studying drones. The idea was that the wing would heat up more, and that would basically smooth the airflow around the wings, reduce turbulence, reduce drag, and potentially increase lift. And like I said, it was a theoretical paper, a really nice one, but we wanted to, see first, are these can we validate these theoretical results with empirical studies? And then, is it actually applicable to birds? Is this maybe one of the reasons that birds have evolved dark wings? And so we did our work. We saw some, NASA, of course, has wonderful wind tunnels. We're in Belgium, so we worked at the Van Karman Institute for Fluid Dynamics. They let us set up this crazy little setup where we basically had a heat source. So we were simulating the sun, and then we had a wing that we got from a study specimen from a live bird, and then we had yeah, other than that, it was kind of a typical aerodynamic setup. We had force balances and things, and so that we could measure lift and drag directly, vary the the amount of radiation and the wind speed and all those types of things, and let us see just how general this effect was. And so this was actually one of our initial results, and this got us really excited. So this video just shows you this Ghent wing that has this dark area and this light area. You can see a live thermal view here, and then you can see a visualization of the heat flowing over this Ghent wing. So you can see the dark area heating up more, and this circular flow of heat around as wind blows on it. Okay, so we got excited about this because it really showed us that the two parts of this hypothesis were seemed to be broadly true. That the wings dark wings did heat up more, and that that had an effect on how winds moved over the wings. And then we did a lot more tests. Again, this was Savannah and Michael spending many hours in this wind tunnel, making very precise measurements and varying the amount of radiation, varying the angle of attack, so the angle that the wing goes against the wind. And yeah, we saw, this is our lift to drag ratio. This is a measure of flight efficiency. And so yeah, the higher the lift to drag ratio, the better, the more efficient the flight. And these don't look like huge differences. This is the dashed line is when there's no radiation. The top line is when there's radiation. So when the heat energy is coming down. And yeah, they're clear but not huge differences. When we visualize it this way, the lift to drag increase, we can see that the efficiency is actually quite good. And in particular, when we have at very low wind speeds and high angles of attack. Okay, and then yeah, we did some additional tests, looking at looking more granularly at how the amount of radiation affects flight efficiency, and by comparing that, and then also looking at a pure black wing. Okay, we saw indeed darker. The more dark you have on the wing, the greater the increase in efficiency, and the more radiation you have, the higher the heat, the greater the heat, the greater the increase in flight efficiency. So yeah, this showed us that overall this theoretical result was true. Does it apply to birds? We looked at a bunch of different bird species, concentrating on seabirds because they do the longest flights, and they have huge variation in coloration. I mean, in black and white coloration, and also in body size and so forth. And by doing these kind of analyses comparing things that might affect flight efficiency, in particular wing loading, we saw that birds that had the highest wing loading, so the greatest body size relative to wing size, actually had darker wings. So perhaps this is a way of compensating for having high wing loading, is by making your flight a bit more efficient. And so so this is from a pure biological standpoint, which is where we really came from. It tells us that the evolution of dark wings could make flight more efficient, in particular in birds that do a lot of flight and have high wing loading. I'm already at the yellow, so I'm just gonna keep going. This is some ongoing research where we want to look at the effects of wing shape, as well as we're designing a pigeon bot to see if these effects hold true with flapping flight, which is what most birds do. Most birds don't just soar endlessly. Okay, and so counterintuitively, melanin, despite being dark, also actually makes some of the brightest colors in nature. So this hummingbird actually has melanin-based coloration. And I think other folks have explained structural color. This is by arranging the material into nanostructures. This is how birds arrange melanosomes into nanostructures. And so by arranging things, as in the helicoids, you take ordinary materials and arrange them in particular ways, you get emergent properties. Here you arrange them in particular ways, and you get at the nanometer scale and make really bright colors out of a dark material. Okay, and one of the cool things about birds is that they have these really interesting melanin structures. These are hollow melanosomes. I can actually show you an image here. So as a previous talk showed you, they're yeast-made hollow melanosomes. Birds actually make hollow melanosomes as well. Those have interesting optical properties, and we're interesting to see if those also have interesting photothermal properties. I'll skip that. This is actually the more complete story. But the long and short of this is that there are differences in photothermal properties of these different shapes of melanin. So shape of the melanosome seems to affect its photothermal property. Now we want to know if nanostructuring those melanosomes, we know that the individual melanosomes have interesting and various thermal properties. We want to know if nanostructuring those actually affects those photothermal properties. So we looked at sunbirds, which have a really diverse array of structural colors that are produced by these arrays of melanosomes. Okay, and yeah, we saw that again they varied in the amount of in their thermal properties. Okay, so they varied in this is wavelength, this is reflectance from 300 to 2,000 nanometers, and yeah, we see that surprisingly iridescent nanostructures, again counterintuitively, despite being brightly colored, actually absorb more heat than melanin-based colors, than carotenoid-based colors. So they're actually the most absorbent bird feather color. And this is because they have melanin in them. And we want to know if the fact that they had melanin in them, just the fact that they had melanin made them absorb more heat, or whether it had something to do with the nanostructures. In collaboration with Ali and his student Anve, we did modeling and showed that, in fact, it wasn't nanostructuring that's important. It's simply the amount of melanin, that iridescent feathers had more melanin in them than typical melanin-based feathers. So this is quite interesting. So yeah, it's not necessarily the amount, the nanostructuring of the melanin that gives them iridescent feathers, their heat-absorbing properties, but rather just adding bulk melanin is what gives them those properties. Okay, and these slides more or less show the same thing. Okay, and then briefly, I know I'm on red, but I'll just quickly end up. I want to talk a bit more about, this is all fundamental research I've shown you. You can probably think there are some pretty obvious applications for some of it. But yeah, thanks to our postdocs and collaborations, we've actually moved towards, potentially commercially interesting product. This is actually very preliminary data, but I think is very interesting and promising from Wanji, showing this, and someone else mentioned synthesis of melanin. We've been very involved in synthesizing different types of melanin. This is DHN melanin, inspired by fungal melanin. And when you make melanin, typically when you synthesize it, it's a black or brown color, as you saw earlier. Here we actually get, without doing anything, we synthesize melanin that's blue in solution, that's gray, and actually we've gotten up to reds and oranges. Okay, without any nanostructuring or anything else, just simply these synthetic melanins in solution. Done some very preliminary work with dyes, literally just throwing this stuff onto some cotton fabric. But yeah, it holds onto the cotton. It dries there. We haven't done any washing or anything like that, but it actually functions as a new dye. And with these potentially interesting thermal properties, this could kind of circle back where we have a single dye that has both color, optical and thermal properties for clothing and potentially for dyes as well. This is something Wanji did as well, looking at this, adding color to this starch-based material, the starch-based food that's very popular in China, and giving it this extra color. With that, I'll I'll end and we can go to this session. Go to the questions. Thanks.